So it's something that you've talked a lot about is the evolution from content-rich learning
Yeah,
to
yeah,
experience-rich learning, and
yeah.
maybe to add another framework on there, the move from needing to know what to needing to know who and how.
Mm,
If you could expand on that a little
yeah, and
bit.
that's a great question. I always refer to Rob Cross, Professor Rob Cross, he's been the leading person in social network analysis for many years. And Rob wrote a great paper saying it's not what you know, but who you know that I forget the actual name of it, but that gets you ahead in an organization. And I think that's absolutely right. Cross's work also showed that people with rich and diverse networks are actually better performers. So if you've got a team of people that can stretch out and have networks that feed, that feed into other areas, they're more likely to produce high quality work. And so I think that making this change from content rich learning to experience rich learning is a real challenge for L&D, because I think that, my entire career, I'm aware that L&D has been obsessed with designing, developing, and delivering formal learning content. And in fact, I often, with my tongue in my cheek, I think the learning and development department in many organizations could actually be renamed the formal learning and content development department, because really that's the focus. That's not to say that doesn't have value, but it's not enough. I've never seen an expert emerge from a formal learning course or an e-learning program. I've seen competent people or people with levels of competence emerge from formal learning and content-rich learning, but I've never seen an expert. It's a bit like, I think I see formal learning a bit like getting a driving license. I don't think any of us would say that once we passed our test and got a driving license, that we were expert drivers. We have a license to operate. We're considered safe enough to go on the roads. The learning to become from being a competent driver, competent enough to have a license, and being a good driver is all about lots of experience, lots of practice, time, and these sorts of things. So, I find it strange we're focused on this idea of content-rich learning when we know, and all the research tells us that most learning actually comes from daily work practices. It doesn't come through a classroom or three learning or via learning pathway. Let me just explain for a minute, if I can just share my screen. I don't know whether anyone here knows of these two men, Edward Thorndike and Robert Wood. For me, I think every L&D professional should be aware at least of their work. I mean, Thorndike wasn't a very nice individual personally, but Thorndike and Woodworth published their theory of identical their theory of identical elements back in 1901, so 123 years ago. They called it the transfer of practice. And basically what their research showed was that the more elements in the environment where you learn to do something are similar to the environment, there's similar number of elements or more elements in the environment where you're going to have to do that work, do that thing, the more likely you are to learn it. In other words, the transfer becomes easier. The more different they are, the transfer is more difficult. So I think that we can go back, and there's lots more research as well as Thorndike and Woodworth. But I think that sort of indicates to me the fact that if we think about learning as being about how can we give people the right experiences, how can we put them in the environment where they need to perform. And again, the research shows that performance in tests doesn't necessarily transfer into performance in the workplace. Again, there's been research that shows that high performers, people who do tests, can do well in their formal tests, aren't necessarily the highest performers. So I just think we need to think about that. And it's, as I say, it's not just Thorndike and Woodworth. If I can just again share my screen for a second. This gentleman, who was certainly the greatest macroeconomist in my lifetime, Ken Arrow, who was at Stanford University for many years, he studied learning by doing and wrote lots and lots of papers and books and so on around that. And not only did Arrow earn a Nobel Prize for economics, actually 6 of his students have earned Nobel Prizes as well. So he's really top of his game. And Arrow said many years ago that there's this one empirical generalization. It's so clear that all schools of thought must accept it, that learning can only take place through an attempt to solve a problem, therefore only takes place during activity. We could spend a few hours talking about that. But actually, I think there is an element of truth. We learn through doing things and reflecting on how it went If it didn't go so well, we do it again, change the ways we do things, and we get better. So I've always said that learning, is a combination of experience, practice, conversations, and networks and reflection. And so I think that there's quite a lot of research which backs this up. So if we continue to simply focus on content-based learning, I think we're really missing a trick.